Hey, welcome to like Shady Entertaining, eh? Today I'm gonna do like my Canada Day special, eh? So if you want to know why I'm talking like this, it's mostly because a lot of people out there in the world think that like this is what it means to be like a Canadian, eh? So I'm going to do like what people expect to see, eh? And that's like do my Canadian accent, eh? Truth is, most Canadians don't talk this way, guys. Some do. Don Cherry certainly does. If you guys know Don Cherry, Hockey Night in Canada, take off, eh, you hoses! He talks like that. So, a little bit. Most Canadians don't. That was made popular by Bob and Doug McKenzie, one of my favorite movies, which was Strange Brew, which I recommend you guys check out. One of the top, for me, my favorite Canadian comedy ever. Yeah, guys, so today is Canada Day, and I'm doing my Canada Day extravaganza. Le Français. You know, listen, in Canada, you guys may not know this in the US, but we actually get a lot of your TV. And we have specific channels like Le CBC, Le Radio Canada, where, you know, they try and focus on Canadian stuff. Because most of the time we're inundated with just American stuff. Most Canadians probably could sing the American national anthem better than most Americans can. Hell, we could probably sing it better than we could sing Old Canada. Because we've heard it so often, right? Because it's everywhere. So we've had so many American influences, but as a kid growing up in Toronto, Canada, or as you guys like to call it, Toronto, Canada. You know, there was a lot of Canadian comedians and artists that influenced me greatly. I mean, I always tend to listen to, there's a lot of American influences out there and great American artists, but as a Canadian, I always tended to sort of, I guess because you saw yourself in them, right? And you said, well, if they could succeed, then sure as hell I can too, right? So these were the guys that were Canadians that influenced me to be the man that I am today. I'm not sure these people want to take responsibility for this, but unfortunately they have to. So that's what today is all about, guys. I'm going to pick my top 5 major Canadian influences. There's obviously many more. Some are Americans, some are other cultures, but this is Canada Day, and I'm doing my homage to Canada. Oh, Canada. Something, something, something in French. Then another English verse, then some French verses, and some English verses and things. First thing I'm going to get things straight before I get into my list, guys. Because I know a lot of people will be like, oh, no, God, I thought you were going to be like all Canadian, eh? And you started off like that. What happened, eh? Be Canadian, you got to know that there's multiple accents in Canada. Which is kind of surprising when you think about how big we are. The accents are actually not that many, considering. I mean, just put things into perspective. You can go anywhere in England and have walk 2 steps and there's someone with a different bloody accent, you know? You can be like, hello, I'm from Liverpool. You know, 1 minute, hey, I'm from Sussex. Distance-wise, Canada's massive, right? So you go from one part of the country to the other, and there's not very much difference from the way we talk. I mean, even the United States, there's so many different, accents. You go to Boston, you go to New York, you go to Texas, you know, and they're all these different accents. In Canada, you know, to say that this giant nation that's second largest landmass on the planet has, you know, just talk like this, eh? And if we don't talk like this, then we definitely talk with a French accent, little like this, and we talk bonjour, comment ça va, how are you? For instance, we go to Nova Scotia, Newfoundland. You go to Newfoundland, that's where you can get a lot of the A's. Most of the A's come from Newfoundland. That's like when you go to Newfoundland, they speak a little more like this. Gordon Tundra, Jesus H. Christ, eh? Where's the fish not? You know, and all the boot stuff. That's when you go to BC, and then that part, the western part of Canada, where they go, hey boot, this, you know. Then you get to northern Canada, that's where you got the more native talking people, eh? I'm hearing Canadians just yelling at me all over the place. What are you talking about? Stop giving them all this wrong information on us. All Canadians turn into George Costanza for 5 seconds. You're killing independent Canada. Just a little less in Canadian accents here. But I do find Britain funny, isn't it? Like literally you go from speaking bloody English, hello, I'm from England, now I am, to walking across a border 2 seconds later, and suddenly they're talking all harsh like this. What's the matter with you? And you go to Ireland and they're like, oh, fiddly-dee potatoes. And there's such a small area. This is called Canadian exercise. Alright guys, no more chevaling around. That's horsing around in French. Because this is going to be a Canadian thing, I'm going to do half in French and half in English. I'm going to speak like this for some of it, and then je vais parler un petit peu comme ça, and then I'm going to have a fight with myself for independence. She don't want my independence. Forget about it. Little Canadian history too. Alright guys, So I hope there's some Americans out there that follow me that might actually be interested to know a little bit of Canada and what influenced me growing up. This is going to be funny, guys. You know me, how I do things. There's going to be tons of crazy antics and impressions coming your way. So give us a chance. So in all my lists, there's no order because I don't care what's number 1 and number 5. It doesn't matter. They all had an influence in my life growing up. It was when I was just a wee lad, just a twinkle in my father's nutsack. Nutsack twinkled. Doesn't everybody's? I mean, I was just the apple of my father's eye. The first influence I had when I was younger, because I was a small kid growing up. It was one of those things that when you're small and you're tiny, you get picked on a bit. That's kind of where I developed my sense of humor, because if you didn't have a sense of humor about yourself growing up, you could get picked on easily, and I learned how to deflect things through comedy. Instead of them laughing at me, I had them laughing with me. So that's a lesson for you guys. You get picked on in school for anything. It doesn't have to be for your height. It could be for maybe you got a slightly western leaning nose or eyes that are a little cross-eyed. Hey, there's no worries, guys. Own it, right? Own what you got. Don't worry about it. Have a sense of humor about yourself, because that's one thing I learned. You have a sense of humor about yourself growing up, and you learn how to laugh about yourself. And you know what? People will laugh with you. They'll stop laughing at you and they will laugh with you. That's a little helpful information for training entertainment. So, growing up as a kid, my first man crush, the guy I had to I would try to be when I said I want to be like this when I grew up, right? I just was a fan of everything he did, his movies. I didn't even know he was Canadian at first because, he was on American TV. So when he was on Family Ties, I kind of didn't even know he was Canadian until afterwards someone said, he's from Vancouver, right? And I was like, really? That's right, yeah, Vancouver, eh? Get out of town, eh? And when I found that out, that even just made me even more happy, because to me, Michael J. Fox was the coolest short guy ever. Still is. I mean, you don't get cooler than him. You can even tell some of my mannerisms, because I used to watch him all the time. So I adapted a lot of his mannerisms. So a lot of these hand gestures, a lot of this stuff, that came from Michael J. Fox. It was like, whoa, are you trying to tell me, Doc? Yes, my head. I used to go to school with a briefcase and a suit. He was my idol. Michael J. Fox, not just Michael J. Fox, but especially Alex P. Keaton. Family Ties, he was my idol. Then when I saw Back to the Future in the 80s, and I saw him skateboarding, and the first time I saw him holding the back of the Jeep on the skateboard, I thought that was the coolest thing I had ever seen in my life. I was like, wow, my idol just got 500 times cooler. I bought a skateboard, scuffed up both my knees 1,000 times. Mother took the skateboard away, hit me over the head with it first. You stupid idiot. Went back to getting my briefcase. But he was a huge influence in my life. Then when I found out he had Parkinson's, it's kind of a bummer for me. And but I still love him. I still respect him. And for me, he is my number 1. He's number 1 only because he kicked it off for me. He gave me confidence. A lot of his movies I would play just because it gave me confidence. I want to be like Mike. For me, it was Michael J. Fox. Shane J. Fox growing up. So that's my number 1 Canadian influence, guys. And I know there's probably even Americans that were probably felt the same way of Michael J. Fox, which as a Canadian made me feel proud too. So number 2 influence for me was Jim Carrey. Kill Surprise. Now I know this comes a little bit later, and there's a lot of good Canadian talent. I'm talking about influences in my life. So I know people in the comments might be like, well, you're missing John Candy, you're missing Dan Aykroyd, you're missing... And I'm like, I get it, they're all awesome people. And I'll make a list of all the great Canadian actors that were great and influenced a lot of people. I'm talking about personally influenced me. Jim Carrey is an obvious one. When you look at me and you look at the things I say and how I say it, my facial expressions, the way I talk like this. Jim Carrey was a huge influence in my life. Why? Because he was crazy like me. And when he came onto the scene, I wanted to be just like him. Just like Jim. Jim Fox. So now I'm Jim Fox. Yeah, Jim Carrey. Ace Ventura. I was the coolest thing ever saw. It was funny and it was awesome. And I kind of mimicked his style. It was sort of I was crazy. I started doing impressions before Jim Carrey came onto the scene. I learned impressions when I was in school. Again, trying to fit in and do cool things. And I started off with my first impression was Pee Wee Herman, at the time. Just shows you how long time ago that was, right? First I know you are, what am I? That was my first impression. Everybody thought it was great. And then I think the second impression I used to do was because Eddie Murphy, unfortunately he's not Canadian, but he was a huge influence in my life as well. Out of all the Americans, he was probably the most influential in my life was Eddie Murphy. I love Eddie Murphy. Kiss my ears. I love Eddie Murphy and Eddie Murphy movies. So as Americans go, he was probably my greatest. And he did voices too. And he was one of the guys that actually, I'm here, I'm supposed to be talking about Canadians. Couldn't help it. So, but I'm going to throw in my one American influence. Well, not one, but the major one. Yeah, Eddie Murphy, you know, he was the one who started me off with the impressions, and he used to do the Mr. T. You know, it was many a fool I used to pity back in the day because of his Mr. T. Which I'm not going to do it now because I do not know. It's funny because I remember I do every other impression, but for some reason I lost Mr. T. Well, I didn't lose him. I know where he is, but I pity a fool. That's all I can remember doing. But I'm pretty sure though, if I was to watch a ton of his videos and stuff, I'd probably pick it up again. But because I haven't seen it in a long time, it's kind of like a distant memory, you know, like an echo from a distant time. It's like a language that you don't use often, and if you don't use it enough, not that you lose it, but you kind of have to sort of be reintroduced to it. So that's kind of how the impressions are for me, guys, in case you didn't know. So back to Canadians, because this is supposed to be a Canada Day show. So Jim Carrey was huge, right? All of his movies, Ace Ventura, Mask, smoke it. And I used to just walk around going, smoke it, annoying the hell out of everybody. You want some of that? Smoke it. Smoke it. Every time someone would make fun or make a joke, and like his mannerisms. And hello there, and how are you doing this afternoon? Everything I did was talking like this. My first ever time doing stand-up comedy. I did a Jim Carrey impression. A lot of people could tell that. It's a lot of my mannerisms and my facial movements and stuff. Like I haven't, you see? You see what I'm saying? Wow. You can see, I'm like a hodgepodge conglomeration of multiple different Canadian actors. Wow. How are you doing this afternoon? So, he was an influence for me. Number 3, and it's very close, because number 2 and number 3 were very close. Sheree, welcome to Shane's World. Alright. No, this is Mike Myers. Mike Myers for me because him specifically, he comes from Toronto. He was a huge Toronto fan. He's a huge Maple Leafs hockey team fan. And he lived a dream that I always wanted to do. I always wanted to go to Saturday Night Live. And unfortunately, it hasn't happened yet. Still hoping. So Mike Myers to me was number 3 on my list. He's really high. I mean, So I Married an Axe Murderer. I know a lot of people may not have watched that, but that was a movie that really influenced me. I used to go to dates and just mimic things that I saw he did in that thing. Like go to a girl's house and be like, you know what this place needs? A giant picture of Atlantic City. Oh wait a minute, you got one. Camera 1, camera 2. That was from Wayne's World. Sheree. Okay, excellent. Okay. When I got a lot of my Scottish stuff from him. I learned a lot of Scottish. When he did his fat bastard, right? Get in my belly. Even though it's probably not an accurate one. I mean, it probably could get a little more accurate. But it's I learned that it was from watching him. And it wasn't even from Fat Bastard. He used to do a thing on Saturday Night Live, which was, I think it was, if it's not Scottish, it's crap. You remember that one, guys? His little sketch he did, if it's not Scottish, it's crap. He was a huge influence for me, Mike Myers. We both went to Second City. A lot of Canadians did. Kind of tried to follow his footsteps too in career path. Didn't work out as well for me yet. Yeah, so number 4, guys, Rick Moranis. Rick Moranis has to be up there as one of my top Canadian influences. He didn't have as much of an influence as the other guys in my life, although, I really liked, but when we talked to doing that Canadian accent, it was sort of the first Canadian movie that I truly loved, him and Dave Thomas were really cool in my eyes, because I used to love Bob and Doug McKenzie, and I used to do this on stage a lot when I was in high school, and so I really learned a lot of things from him. He kind of taught me that it was okay to make fun of yourself. That's another thing, because he knew, Rick Moranis was one of those guys, Michael J. Fox was the cool guy, right? And taught me that I could be cool. If I'm just a little guy could be cool. Rick Moranis also said, hey, a little guy could also be, could be a little goofy too. Could be a goof, and could just be just as fun. And Spaceballs, he was probably one of my favorite roles was him in Spaceballs. I just loved him in that, and so he was a huge influence for me. And last but not least, as Canadians go, guys, John Candy. Now, John Candy, again, I'm not going to say he was an influence as far as the other guys were influences. Like, I didn't try to be like John Candy, but John Candy, just his career in itself, who he was, he had huge fame in the United States. Uncle Buck, Canadian Bacon, he did so many movies, like just a ton. Home Alone, he just did a ton of movies, and he still managed to keep himself grounded. Like a lot of Canadians, they go to the United States and they kind of get lost in the U.S. Like Michael J. Fox, like I didn't even know he was Canadian until someone mentioned it to me once, and I was like, oh really? Because I always felt like he was a little more detached from Canada, and Jim Carrey, same thing. A lot of times I didn't even know he was Canadian. He's from Mississauga, but I didn't know that, right? By the way, I also had a competition in my own mind with Jim Carrey, because he performed stand-up comedy at the Yuck Yucks Comedy Club in Canada. Like, I think he was 16 or something, his first time. Although I didn't beat him, I did it at 17. But I heard he bombed his first time at the club. They were telling me that first time Jim Carrey went and did stand-up, he bombed. And my first time doing stand-up comedy, I didn't bomb. Mind you, I did some Jim Carrey, so figure that one out. Whose career is better, I wonder? Yeah, so I don't put John Candy as the guy who I wanted to be like, or like, not that I didn't like, that I mimicked or anything, but he was a guy that you could say, wow, this Canadian made it, and he stayed grounded, like his roots, grounded to, like I said, a lot of Canadians tend to kind of get lost in the United States. Not that they forget they're Canadian, but they don't look back as much, and a lot of them did. Like Mike Myers looked back, even though he lives in LA now. I know that John Candy, he always looked back, and he came to Canada a lot. He even bought the Toronto Argos. He always stayed true to Canada. Those were the top Canadian influences in my life growing up. Now, there's a lot of them. I can go through a list of Russell Peters and other Canadian comedians that were really good and deserve mention here. Dave Thomas. How can I forget William Shatner? There's no Canadian like William Shatner. For those people who didn't know that Captain Kirk was Canadian, well, know now that Captain Kirk is from Montreal. Born in Montreal. He is Canadian. And we just don't want to hear him sing "Oh Canada." Oh, Canada. Oh, and native land. I'll spare you guys the rest. True, pleasure, love. Phil Hartman was Canadian. Norm Macdonald, another great Canadian, hilarious guy. Martin Short, talk about a guy who's short. Got short in his name. Will Arnett, Tommy Chung, Colin Mockery. You might know him from Whose Line Is It Anyway? Catherine O'Hara, guys. Come on, Catherine O'Hara. Got to represent some of the females here, man. When we're talking about Canadians, I'm just talking about actors right now. Obviously, there's been more men that have made success in the States. But if we're talking singers, Celine Dion, Alana Miles, guys. I know you guys don't know Alana Miles. Check her out. Black Velvet, if you please. Alanis Morissette.
It's like rain on your wedding day. It's a free ride when you're already late.
Someone should have told her what ironic means. Look, her agent should have said something. Let her go there and sing all kinds of wrong information about things that are ironic. Those are just coincidences. Michael Cera, I haven't mentioned him. Russell Peters. Howie Mandel.
He told me I do Bobby. One of my first impressions was also Bobby from Bobby's World.
I don't know if you guys remember Bobby from Bobby's World, but
Hey, I'm Bobby.
it was one of my first impressions. One of my first. I would say Pee-wee, Mr. T, and then
Bobby was one of my really first ones. I did a whole long time ago.
but now nobody really knows who Bobby is. In Canada, Rick Mercer, but Harlan Williams, great guy, great comedian. I actually had a chance to meet that dude. Really amazing dude. Brett Butt from Corner Gas, guys should know him. Samantha Bee, whatever. Sean Majubner, I actually think he's one of the more funny Canadian guys. Obviously Dan Aykroyd, I think I mentioned him. Eugene Levy, I took my Eugene Levy to the levee, but the levee was dry. Seth Rogen. Ryan Reynolds. Hey, Ryan Reynolds, probably right now the #1 Canadian out there. So, I'm going to end on Ryan Reynolds. So these guys were all influential Canadians. They influenced my life. I look up to all these guys. Not that they were the only people. Like I said, there's a lot of Americans I looked up to, a lot of British I looked up. I used to love Monty Python, so John Cleese, those guys. You want to talk about influencing, the British influenced me a lot as well. There was Paul Hogan, Australians. Crocodile Dundee, come on! Those guys from I'm Too Sexy For, those guys were good. Remember those guys, right, said Fred? They were a bit of an influence on me because I used to walk around strutting my stuff. I'm a model, you know what I mean. And I do my little turn on the catwalk. And on the catwalk, I shake my little tush. Australia brought us some amazing things. New Zealand, God, Flight of the Conchords, I love those guys. So there's influences going all around. I'm not trying to exclude anyone. But today's Canada Day, and that's why I did my Ode to O Canada. Oh guys, someone, before I go, this is a big boy. He's my man. Let's say, look at the camera. It's camera shy. Where my kisses? Where my kisses? Oh, joy, boy. Oh, give me that nose. I'm gonna take your nose. I'm gonna take your nose. Watch this, guys. My nose. I call him Bubba, but that's kind of a nickname. I said, hey, Bubba. But his name is Comet. Me and my wife got him Christmas, and we wanted to name after something Christmassy, and we thought that when he was a little baby, he looked like a reindeer, a little tiny itty bitty reindeer. So we went through the list of reindeer names, and we came up with Comet. This is my little boy. He's my man. Right, Comet? Huh? He's gonna bite your nose. Bite my nose. That's my nose. That's my nose. Can I take your nose? Okay, here. Take it back. He doesn't like that. And of course, as a pain in the ass than I am, I do it all the time. Alright, your 15 minutes of fame are up. Alright, guys. Full of hair. Alright, guys, I hope you enjoyed this. For all you Canadians out there, hope I did us proud. If not, well, sorry, I tried. Happy Canada Day. And see, there I go again. Wow. Yeah, and now that I'm pointing it out, it's bothering me that I'm doing it because I'm like, where's my own stuff? Just like hold my arm. So anyway, happy Canada Day, guys. Thank you, mon ami, and thank you for all the subscribers who stuck by me, who comment and who like it, and I hope you enjoyed this. All right, guys, take off, Eric.
Decent singing, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's good.